indeed. We're trying to get the youth to work. Now, of course, on Sunday, it is June 16, and that's South African Youth Day. So we continue our coverage. Now, youth unemployment is one of the main focuses of South Africa's development plans, with particular emphasis being placed on entrepreneurship to combat the high rate of unemployment. For a discussion now on this is Mbali Ntuli, leader of the Democratic Alliance Youth, and we're supposed to be joined as well by Shaka Sisulu from the ANC Youth League. So we're still waiting for him to join us, but we'll begin the conversation nonetheless. So you've got an opportunity to score the first point here by outlining where the Democratic Alliance in respect to initiatives that ought to be taken to try and create greater youth unemployment.
I think it's very clear that unemployment is a big thing in our country. So the things that we've been driving as a Democratic Alliance Youth have obviously been in line with National Treasury's youth wage subsidy. That's the first. It's obviously not a silver bullet. Yeah. But we also agree that entrepreneurship is exactly the role that, or exactly the way that South Africa needs to be taking the unemployment crisis. Yeah. Because we want to create a culture of having job creators as opposed to job seekers, which is what we're currently seeing many of the economic policies on the table are actually pushing young people into. Yeah. So we would, you know, try and advocate very strongly for things like collateral funds, where the government will stand surety against young people who want to have some forms of businesses, that they would be able to be subsidized in that way. We would give tax incentives for companies that would mentor these young entrepreneurs, because currently in our education system, we don't see enough of an entrepreneurial skills program being pushed. So you have people at the end who are then expected to start these businesses, but we need them to be mentored. So we definitely incentivize people to do that for young people. We've also spoken about, you know, the DA youth development programs that we have in the Western Cape, which deal specifically with work and skills projects that are also aimed at entrepreneurship. So we agree that it's a very big component of one of the ways that we need to start curbing the unemployment crisis. Yeah. Who created those programs? Were you involved in creating those problems, or was this the big guys sitting and saying, this is what we want to do for the youth? The main problem with South Africa right now is that the youth aren't actually stepping up to the table to say how they want their issues addressed. You won't find that in the Democratic Alliance Youth. We are completely at the table when these policies are being drawn up. We lobby for these policies to be drawn up, and we make sure that where our governments are in place, we are actually making sure that we are keeping oversight as young people, that they are taking care of our needs. So yes, I was definitely part of the formulations of them. How old are you, Bali? I am 25 years old. You're 25. Do you work? I do work. I have my own businesses. I'm in the taxi industry and the events industry, and I'm also a politician. I'm a councillor in eThekwini. So you are involved in formulating policy, but you're also an employer on your own. Was it tough for you to find a job or to create the businesses that you are now running? I think I'm probably what we would call the lucky 5% in our country, the people that have been afforded opportunities that they've been able to use. My story, and I think a lot of people's stories that have been able to go to university and have further tertiary education, is not one that is common in South Africa. We're sitting with 4.7 million young people who are not skilled, have not had good education, and so don't even know where to begin and trying to access those opportunities. But I have been lucky, but I have also worked really hard to get What's the policy of the DA in using education to create employers and entrepreneurship? Education is the complete key. Without having that basic foundation to make sure that people actually know what they need to be doing, and cultivating a culture of not telling people what to think, but how to think, you aren't going to be able to fix the great economic crisis that we have now. So when you look at education, for example, we need to look at things like the infrastructure. Children need to actually be able to be in a school that is not just a school name, but actually be in a place where they can actually have a conducive environment to learning. But on top of that, we also need to look at what they are learning and how that is being you know, channeled towards them being able to become entrepreneurs. I'll come back to you and ask you what you think ought to be changed from the current policy, because Shaka has joined us now. Shaka, thanks very much indeed for coming through eventually. So she's stolen a march on you, because I asked you to say what exactly the DA has been doing around youth unemployment. From an ANC perspective, what are you guys proposing change? Because you are in part implementing your policies already anyway, but some of them have worked, some of them have not worked.
Yeah. Look, I suppose we appreciate the dynamics of the market at this point in time. And I think it's important to note that even some of the best policies that my learned friend would be putting on the table are policies that have originated from within our particular movement. Right. We, however, don't have the benefit of simply saying, do this and do that. You know, we have to carefully consider the impact that we have on this particular, you know, that any any policy has on the particular market. Now, the one thing in particular around, the one thing that concerns us in particular is the fact that jobs can't simply be a government agenda.
True.
And we have...
Bali is nodding.
Yeah, of course. But, because otherwise we have a bloated public sector, and that's really not what we're looking for. But what we really are looking for is how do we stimulate the economy, and how do people within the economy that are active players actually come to the party?
So what ideas are you putting forward to stimulate the economy?
Well, we need to ask ourselves, what is preventing us from using the £500 billion rand that is sitting, on private company balance sheets and not being invested? What is the sentiment that is driving us to say...
How do you unlock it?
How do we unlock that? What's the sentiment that's driving us to say, look, how do we invest in Africa, not just because we're looking for growth, but also as a risk mitigation against what could be happening in South Africa? So those are key, I think, areas that we need to be looking at to say, let's us create the path so that business can actually come back to the party.
So I'll come back and ask my question again. So what would you change with the current policy setup? Because as I said, you're in a position where you can actually implement some of these policies.
Look, the thing about the policies is we have great policies. The issue that we have is nuance. And I think from our perspective, it's really looking at our policy framework and saying, what nuances can we develop in terms of that implementation? How do we assist in terms of the implementation? And how do we actually build greater partnerships for that implementation?
Bali, I don't want you to punch holes in his argument. I want you to give me other ideas of what ought to change now from what we have now, because you, of course, there's an opportunity to put your ideas into the public domain. And also in the Western Cape, of course, you have a platform from which you can actually implement some of them.
And we have. As I mentioned, we've already started our Skills and Works project, which is something that actually looks at upskilling young people, because the problem is not just that people don't have employment, is that they aren't even skilled to try and find that employment or have any sort of further education or even matrics in some situations. So we have a complete program that deals specifically with those people from the ages of 16 to 24. We also have what we call our Work and Skills program, that is actually a form of the youth wage subsidy that we've employed in the Western Cape, and that is working completely well. So whilst I take shock...
Is it working?
It is completely working.
When you say completely well, what do you mean? Give me numbers.
We have an 85% retention rate of the people that we are actually sending out to about 700 companies that we are working with in the Western Cape. So we are exactly doing what the youth wage subsidy should be doing, except that obviously because we're not a national government, we can only do it at a provincial level.
But the ANC would argue they are the originators of the idea, right?
And you know what?
I think she proves the point. She proves the point that this is an issue about partnerships. I mean, the organizations that they engaged with really buy into the idea that they should be the custodians of this, and they should be driving this, and so they do it. And yet, when we look at it at a macro level, there are many organizations that don't necessarily feel the same. So it's easy to use a pilot and say, look, let's get the top 700 guys that we know very well and we have a great relationship with. But it really comes down to that commitment. Being able to create those jobs, bring those people in, skill them up, retain them, whilst not letting go of our current existing staff, which has been the greatest fear within the Alliance movement.
I've been told I've got half a minute to close this argument, so I want your closing arguments quickly. We're in Parliament now. You go first.
I think that I take Shaka's point about it being difficult, but I don't think that there's political will enough in our country to sometimes get these programs off the ground. And I think that if we really want to curb the issue of youth unemployment in our country, then we need to start seeing people taking bold decisions, bold choices, and we look to the leadership that is in the governing party. But going towards 2014 and Youth Day, we hope that young people are also going to start becoming far more active and taking a role about speaking about their issues. 2014,
they have a chance to implement your policies if you come into power.
That's great. I mean, we recently signed up to the Youth Accord, so we have, really.
Yeah, we have a problem with that.
We aren't just talking about it. We've been doing it. We've been working on the ground towards this. And we've actually been at the cold face of ironing out the kinks. Because it's easy to look at it from a one-sided perspective. As the ANC organization, we represent all constituencies, not just one particular constituency.